Hello, Drunkduckers! Welcome to the Drunkduck Quackcast. I am Ozone Ocean, and with me is Baines and Tant Serene. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. This week, our topic is I was there. I was there. So that's our topic.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. Just take my word for it. Okay, so hello people, welcome to the Drunkduck Quackcast. We're going to be talking about I was there, so history that you were there for, basically, and how the world has changed since. So, before we get into that, I've got to bring up featured comic. Featured comic this week was Wings of Dare. So, I'll tell you about that now. Hello, I'm Ozone Ocean, and my feature for this week was Wings of Dare. Poor young Fiad just doesn't seem to fit in at all. He's having an absolutely terrible time, but through it all, he shines as brightly as the sun. Seemingly nothing can get him down. He's an acolyte, one of among many of his world's religious order, and he's particularly out of favour. People who he thinks are his friends want to cripple him for life or even kill him, but it might be them who are about to suffer that fate. There's a vicious assassin bounty hunter on the loose, and she's not taking any prisoners. This is an action drama story. The style is manga, and it is full colour. Wings of Dare. This is a comic by Ardhiel, and it's rated T for teen. So have a look. It's manga style, nice and colourful. Lots of dramatic stuff, and there's some comedy as well. It's a good mix. There's comedy, silliness, and vicious violence. So, if you're into that, you can have a bit of a look and see if you enjoy it. So, have a look at Wings of Dare with a T. That was Wings of Dare. So, I hope you like that. I hope you go and check it out. Okay, so next up we have the featured music. Gummons has given us the theme to Capricious Infection this week. Capricious Infection. What do you do when you've got a capricious infection? Well, you try and heal it, I suppose. Get some antibiotics. Okay, so this is a mystical, magical, stargazing sound. It touches of Journey of the Sorcerer by the Eagles. You can imagine you're in a field in darkness, wandering over cold, dew-wet grass and gazing up at the vast, glittering majesty of the Milky Way above. Take it away, Gummos, with your Capricious Infection. that was Gum Wallace's Capricious Infection. So I hope you enjoyed that. No, this is Gum Wallace's theme to Capricious Infection, and the comic is by Cressida's Comics, and it's rated T for teen. So I hope you get some, medication for that. I hope you enjoy that comic. Have a look at it and see what it's about. All right.
You should listen to the Cure.
Exactly.
Or listen to Cream. Yeah,
Cream.
Listen to antibiotics.
Yeah.
Yes, and and if you get a really bad infection from that, you might need to get an infusion from Type O Negative. That's a band.
Bad infection, like a rock band or a metal band, like Bad Infection.
Oh dear. So yeah, we're talking about I was there. Now this is just an interesting an interesting topic about the fact that things turn into history. As time passes, and we get further away from stuff, it becomes history, and then it becomes semi-forgotten. And people who come after you, the only way they can experience this moment in history is either, from you telling them about it or them reading about it and watching it on TV. And that's how it has been for all of us when we've tried to experience things that are outside our timeline, haven't we? Like movies and TV have helped us to do that. And big events like the Second World War or the Korean War, even like the Vietnam War. I think when did the Vietnam War finish? That was in the mid-70s or something?
70s or something? Yeah.
We don't even know. We're out of touch. Oh, my God. We're idiots.
Yeah.
All right. I'll do a search.
No, I'll check it out real fast. Because I have 2 laptops. 1975.
75?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So, yeah, that ended. And
For that.
Hey!
Born after, at least I was born after that.
yeah, jeez.
Well, I was going to say the same year as Jaws, right, Cans? You just did a post about the Jaws anniversary.
Exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. So all of those things sort of happened, and
Years
then
ago, Vietnam ended and Jaws came up.
Coincidence? I think not. That shark brought peace to the world by eating everybody. So, yeah, I mean, those kind of things are our history. And then there's stuff in our time and very solidly within our timeline, like, the Cold War, which was a massive, massive world change. So we were all alive for the latter part of the Cold War, the very latter part. Because the Cold War has been going on a long time before all of us came along. Baines, even though you're 80 now. Baines is a young and
I've been around for long.
So the Cold War was old when we came out, but it was still, even though the Cold War was old when we came along, it was at its technological peak, and they were getting closer and closer to the kind of the doomsday scenario all the time. All the way when the Cold War was going on, it wasn't like it reached its peak in the halfway through. It was ratcheting up and up and up and up and up. The danger level was always there. getting worse and worse because the technology was getting better and better and better. And then it sort of just climaxed at the very end and finished, and everything crumbled, and then it was over in the 92 or something, 91, something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was.
I remember I was a big Billy Joel fan, and I was just starting to learn piano around that time. And I was given this tape, this document. It was a concert tape, like a VHS, him in concert in Russia, and then a documentary about him in Russia. And it was sort of the end of the Cold War, and there was this feeling like we could build bridges between people and all that kind of thing. And Billy Joel, just like Jaws saved us from Vietnam, Billy Joel
he ended the Cold War. It's amazing.
He ended the Cold War, yeah. It was a great documentary just because I loved him so much, and I would watch it over and over. And
wow,
it was very powerful seeing the human side of all of that because I was very afraid of nuclear war and all that kind of stuff. I would learn about it, obviously, but it was also the kind of idea of the superpowers and Russia versus the West, like Russia versus America, and I was in Canada, right above America there. It was just in all the popular culture. These are sometimes very subtly, sometimes, as you were mentioning, James Bond and like other fiction like that. These creations of the Cold War. Stuff was everywhere, even though I didn't realize it until later. And then the fear of war and everything. And thank God for the Piano Man.
Give us a song, yeah.
And over here in this, like I said in the video cast, we felt, although technically we do have like a bunch of countries between us and the USSR we had, but we felt that we were right underneath it, and also a country of interest because historically Russia has always wanted a port to the Mediterranean, and guess who has ports to the Mediterranean? So that has always been a thing.
Yeah,
it was felt really direly over here that if the Cold War became hot, we would basically be part of what bakes. So it was in the whole general zeitgeist, for example, like over here, like Cold War this, Cold War that, nuclear destruction, what to do in cases of nuclear attack, as if there's much to do. That sort of thing. Very, very prominent growing up over here.
Yeah, it's a scary, scary time. Even though, like we said in the Patreon video, that there's just as much war as there ever was during the Cold War. Just as much violence, and there's like during the Cold War there wasn't a time of peace. People imagine it. Even then, people sort of had this imagination that it's a Cold War. Everyone we're scared of war, but nothing's going to happen unless something big happens. Everyone's on tenterhooks, but they're all proxy wars and things like that happening during that time, and there's just as much of that happening now. But during them we were afraid that the big war would happen, like the Third World War, where Russia and the US and all the aligned countries would have to choose sides like they did in the Second World War, and everyone would be part of it, because a nuclear war isn't just between countries, it's between everybody. There's no way of getting away from it. But
which is like pretty much what people are afraid of now, with Trump and Israel and Iran and all of that, with Russia and China overlooking things. So the threat of World War III is back.
Yeah.
But it's not.
It's not neat. Like during the Cold War, things were at least neat, because you could imagine, okay, so obviously we're going to be on the American side. That's where we're going to be, and all the communist bloc countries, Warsaw Pact countries, would all be, they were all going to be together, and that was how the world was split. Like good guys with AK-47, good guys with M16s, bad guys with AK-47s. You know, like that was in fiction. That was like all your comics and your movies and your stuff like that. That's how it was portrayed. Like the good guys look like this, bad guys look like that, and that translated to the real world, and it split everybody. It was incredible.
Yeah, where these things are being appended, like the world order is collapsing, as at least in terms of who is positioned where on the chessboard. The other thing was that while all of this was happening, the economy in general, it was never easy, but the economy in general was doing a lot better than it is doing now. So you had certain things that were extremely stable, and you could count on those things. For example, at least over here in Greece, there were certain things that just did not exist, never happened. We didn't have homeless. We didn't have fear that you would, like the moment if you managed to buy your house, it was yours for life. No, but the state did not bother with it. We had no taxation on homes, and we had no, they were not a liability like they can be right now. The utilities were very low. They were very cheap, and they were very stable. You knew exactly what you were going to pay every month.
Same in Australia. There was no homeless to speak of, and the world was just so different. Like you say, utilities, rent, everything like that was very affordable by people and through their normal jobs. You know, people would have one job, and they could afford to pay for those things, and they could get a house, and that was how the world was.
Single income households. Like the guy over here, that we were very, patriarchal. So the guy would go out and work and support his wife and 2 kids. That was basically the average over here, and it would be fine. It started not becoming fine towards the end of the 80s and start of the 90s, where women also had to go out to work to make ends meet, and you knew that that's where things started going downhill, at least over here. But to go back to historical stuff, like more bombastic historical stuff, I remember being around for the perestroika that happened, like with Gorbachev, and this whole fanfare around the perestroika that was going to make the Soviet Union this superior superpower, which was all bullshit, of course. And I remember the Communist Party over here thinking of the perestroika as like God's gift to politics. And I remember my parents discussing that this was basically like my mom. My mom was always able to predict things, not because she's clairvoyant, but because she knows, she can see the writing on the wall really easily. So she was saying like, no, this is going to be a shambles. She didn't say that the Soviet Union would collapse, but that it would become like a banana, like a super banana republic. And the funny thing was that after the collapse of the Soviet Union, which was huge, the Communist Party over here turned on Gorbachev and the perestroika as like the super traitorous thing to happen to the USSR after the fact. Like the same people that were lauding it as this amazing new thing that was cutting edge, and anyone that said anything otherwise was a traitor to the people, all of that. Now the very same people were cursing Gorbachev about. I was there for all that madness. I experienced it. So.
Yeah, it was a tricky. It was an up and down kind of time. Yeah, but for most people now, that would be like an imagined sort of historical state. You know, like in did they have that in Lord of the Rings? They have one of the guys going, "I was there when."
It probably does. I don't remember.
When we stood against the forces of, Sauron and all that kind of stuff. But that's how the Cold War is to a lot of people. But,
yeah, sure.
And, it's something that's important to understand because of so many cultural artifacts that we have from then. Like, we mentioned James Bond, and James Bond is a character that only exists because of the Cold War. Like, people say, oh yeah, Ian Fleming created it, after the Second World War, and it was sort of based on, blah, 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 and this and this and this. No, it was... He created it from his ideas and his experiences and knowledge of things that happened during the Second World War, but he created it during the Cold War, and it was...
Yeah.
And James Bond was a creature of that world, solidly. And then James Bond became, I don't know, like the movie versions of James Bond became the main kind of drive of James Bond, basically. The books was kind of left behind, as what happens. And the movie James Bond was solidly a Cold War creature, even though he's not directly battling the Russians until, I don't know, maybe one of the later versions. I mean, he was sometimes directly battling the Russians when he was in Afghanistan and stuff like that, but those were the later James Bonds. Like, what's his name? Timothy Dalton, I think?
Yeah, my favorite James Bond.
Yes. Whereas the early ones were like fighting, I don't know, Goldfingers or billionaires who had these big giant submarines inside these super tankers.
I think they were like a representation of Soviet magnates.
Yeah. Well, I mean, not necessarily magnates, but Soviet power, basically, because that was a world that allowed that kind of superpower technology to exist. Whereas this world, I mean, we've got people like Elon Musk and what's his name? Sorry?
Who?
Elon Musk and the Amazon guy. Bezos, yeah. So those are basically two super James Bond villains, really, in reality.
They are not nearly as intimidating, though.
But those are the capitalist James Bond villains.
Yeah. So Temu villains.
Temu version. Exactly.
Yeah. There was also, which does not exist right now, and I mentioned it in the videocast, this huge, at least over here, anti-war pop culture wave that I remember growing up, and that was extremely powerful, like going all in on anti-war, like war should never happen, which of course is a great message. And like I even remember I was there watching Mad TV when Michael Jackson's Black or White hit, and for us, because we didn't experience the whole black racism thing that existed in the United States, to us it was packaged a lot more as world peace, being at peace with everybody else, rather than having equality between black and white people, because here skin was never a social divider. Not only, I mean, and not because everyone here is white. You wait for summer to see the real colors of Greeks.
Yeah.
we have the entire like it's like we are like those Swatch catalogs where you see or on the same palette going from super super pale to super super dark. That's Greeks in the summer.
Right.
We all go pale in the winter, but then we come out in all these wondrous shades in the sun. So yeah, skin color was never really an issue in Greece. So it came across as let's all be friends with everybody else and avoid war. So that's how black or white was interpreted here.
Yeah, it was that was a very solid thing in pop culture. You're right, like anti-war stuff. You remember, Bane? Do you remember Family Ties?
Yeah,
The comedy with Michael J. Fox that made him a star.
for sure. Loved it.
So that was like that was one of the premises of this Family Ties sitcom was that Michael J. Fox, the son of, they had a son and two daughters, but Michael J. Fox was super right wing, very very 1980s, very Gen X kind of early Gen X kind of character. I think he would have been early Gen X, but very very right wing, very much in touch with the Reaganist kind of politics back then. But his parents were baby boomers, but they were incredibly left wing because they had come from the period of being born during the Second World War, and then they had experienced the Vietnam War and they'd protested against it, and that was showing that cultural divide between the right-wing kids and the very left-wing parents. And now everybody thinks of boomers as being super right-wing, but that wasn't really the case back then. Yeah. So that was an interesting, and the parents were always very anti-war in that show, and that was a huge part of pop culture back then in the 80s, like that.
Oh yeah,
that show. Yeah,
the mythology, if you will, the reality, but also the mythology of the 60s and the anti-war, whatever, the hippie movement or whatever, that was huge in mainstream pop culture.
It was, and for us, the that's history.
To be the studio heads and the stuff we watched. Was history for us, exactly. So, very interesting. Like the Vietnam War and hippies and Kennedy and all that kind of stuff. That was
Kennedy.
That mythology was so strong everywhere.
Speaking of Billy Joel, Baines, you could start reciting "We Didn't Start the Fire." Kennedy, da 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 da. We didn't start the fire.
Another thing that was unheard of in my time, quote unquote, like when I was growing up, tolerating Nazis, like tolerating any kind of rhetoric that even slightly, like even if there was a whiff of pro-Nazi stuff, like super right wing. And when I say super right wing, I'm not talking about right wingers, which were super established, but certain things, certain rhetorics that now are being even like people are sitting down to argue against them. Like this was not a thing when I was growing up. Like if you made the mistake of showing to endorse anything that could even remotely be connected to being pro-Nazi, you were done. There was absolutely no way to come back from that ever. Even by right wingers, like right wingers would be the first even to cast the stone. It was simply not done. Like and it's not that we didn't have neo-Nazis. We had the Golden Dawn was established somewhere around the 80s, but they were so fringe, and everyone was so aggressively against them that they literally were afraid to say so, that they were that. They were literally afraid to come out in the streets and say so. You would only see them existing in like printed matter that they would leave behind like a smear, like the trail from a snail. You would never see the snail itself because it was
Snail.
So yeah, that was simply not tolerated ever. Like Nazis were the de facto bad guys. Nazis were the devils that uh, you cast like banishing spells against. I don't know how else to put it. Like it was this viscerally rejected by everyone across the political spectrum. There was no, oh, let's be political about them and let's see what they have to say. No, that was not going to fly anywhere in the political scene.
Oh no,
So,
never anywhere in political. I mean, culturally, you could they'd be a part of movies and things like that, so they were characters, but not appropriate for people to actually become Nazis or admit they were Nazis. Never. Like it's the opposite now. It's the complete opposite now. Like, oh my God, you got Nazis in that show? Oh my, you can't show that. No, you have to, like on YouTube, you have to like blank out that. Can't show that. But you can actually be a Nazi, but you just can't have a fictional version, which is weird.
It's the telltale of the times, and it makes sense because the people that want to be Nazis, they don't want to be framed and portrayed as Nazis in fiction, because in fiction they are still the bad guys, so they will not want that shown. But yeah, back in the 80s and 90s, Nazis were like the whole Nazi rhetoric and symbolism and all the regalia or whatever, they were right in your face as bad guys. And that's why in Star Wars, it is so easy to take the Empire as being the bad guys, because they basically are space Nazis and they have the helmets and the uniforms and all of that to prove it. So they like everyone could recognize, space Nazis. There you go.
Yeah, it's very, very obvious.
No, they are the bad guys. Let's get to know our resistance, the good guys, it was non-negotiable. There was nothing to talk about.
Yeah.
And it made sense because people that experienced the actual Nazis were still alive, and they would kick your ass if you said anything pro-Nazi at the time, especially in Greece.
Now, weirdly, there's some changes happened, but you have so many people going, oh my God, communists, they're the worst things ever. Oh, you should kill communists. And they're like, we should have gone with what General Patton said. We fought the wrong enemy. It should have been with Germany and against the communists. And you think, what the hell are you on? You communists were not that evil. I mean, sure, people in the USSR and Stalin was a terrible, awful person. He'd done some bad stuff, but oh my God, the Nazis were so much worse. And then just being a communist is not like being a Nazi. It's not the same thing at all. And if you think that, you're an effing idiot and should, fall on some spikes.
Well, and I have to say, and I'm sorry to the American people watching or listening to us, I cannot not say this, but Americans notoriously they do not know what communism means. They do not know what socialism means. They have just grown up to treat these terms as just the representation of the boogeyman. Communist, socialism, and they don't realize, and they do not bother to realize what these words mean. And how the fact that the USSR was the opposite scarecrow benefited their lives, because a big element of having certain things like social security or certain like they do not have like healthcare or anything, but certainly like the ability to unionize and what have you, the 8-hour workday that now does not exist anymore. All of that was
Yeah.
granted by the West as a way to counterbalance what the communistic mindset was offering, which was basically a whole bunch of packaged rights for the working class. That, of course, uh, was very appealing to the working class, and that's why communism was so popular in the beginning of the 20th century. Uh, the problem was that, as it happens with communism and any other kind of system, it is very easy to associate with dictatorial rule when it happens. And then you have Stalinism that came along, killed off every other version of the USSR that was existing at the time, and I'm not going to go into that. And Stalinism was associated with communism, and Maoism, again, same thing, and what have you. And that is what people look at, and they do not look at what actually communism was all about, originally speaking. It is a hijacked system as much as capitalism is, because capitalism is not this that we're living in right now.
That's right.
And people again do not realize this, because people generally trust positions of power. So yeah, they are telling me this, they must be right. This is something that happens subconsciously. Like, you tend to believe whoever has a microphone and whoever you decide that is the trustworthy person with a microphone, and then you become tribal. That's another thing. Sorry, Americans, that you really should look up what these things are before talking about them. So, yeah.
I have a feeling any Americans who are listening to this and who are on our site are not really brainwashed to that degree.
That's true. But still.
It's a complicated world.
Good books for all.
Yeah.
But you know what? Like, what do you guys? Oh, sorry, Bones. What's that?
I said we're living through history now. I'll just tell you.
Yeah, we always are.
Go ahead.
But I was just going to ask, what are some lost things you remember from history, like that you were there for? It doesn't have to be like the political situation, the dark things. It could be just bands or music styles, and what were things that you were there for?
Moving away from the bad stuff.
Yeah.
Like I said, I was there.
Well, I don't know. Some of that.
Oh, God.
I was just going to say that some of that fashion and music was pretty bad.
Yeah, I remember being there for Michael Jackson being at his peak, and Freddie Mercury, like Queen, again being huge, and having this pop culture right-wing scare about Freddie Mercury, because he was homosexual, and he was going to corrupt our youth, that sort of thing was a thing over here. Nobody cared. Everybody loved Queen anyway.
I love them. I was thinking about that the other day. I heard some songs by David Bowie, and I thought, oh wow, this people sort of regard him like in with awe now. Like, oh my God, he was one of the greatest ever. Oh my God, David Bowie and Prince, people like that. Whereas when I was growing up, they were just pop musicians. Like, David Bowie was cool, but he was just another pop, latest song by David Bowie. Oh, latest song by Prince. Oh, that's cool. But now they think, oh my God, these people are like Leonardo da Vinci to us. That's incredible.
Yeah, they're legends and stuff. And also, I remember, this is again going into the dark side a little bit, but I remember the AIDS scare and how it was handled very poorly by the media, and how this shifted when Freddie Mercury died. So I remember all of this and how the opinions shifted really, really quickly over this.
Well, the AIDS scare was quite interesting because that created, like, we all grew up during that era. So suddenly, oh my God, safe sex has so important. Safe sex, and everyone was going around, with like health education, the use of condoms and all this kind of stuff, and talking about that. So that was something we grew up with, and that changed the world. Like, sexually transmitted diseases went right down, not just AIDS, but all the others as well. And they had this huge comeback in recent years because people think that AIDS isn't such a big thing anymore because a lot of people use the preventative medications and things. People can manage it. So people are being rather laissez-faire with those kind of things. So these common sexually transmitted diseases have suddenly, that were almost gone, are common again. And that's quite scary. And things like herpes, for God's sake, that's, once you've got that, you're never getting rid of it. That's and that's like, people have it now. Oh my God.
Speaking of, vaccines were never doubted, ever. There was no such thing as anti-vaxxers in the time I was growing up. And everybody, even the church over here, and Greece has no separation of church and state, which many people find weird, but we don't. We are a Christian state. The church was very pro-science. Like, the church was pro-science. And the vaccinations were a standard thing. Nobody was considering it a choice not to vaccinate. Technically you could not vaccinate, but you were the stupid person of the village. So
the village idiot.
Yeah. So it was not a thing, and science and how science worked was common knowledge. The fact that science would amend certain things, now we found that this thing is better than that thing that we were using, that was the way science worked. Nobody batted an eyelid. Now we do this thing this way because now we have more evidence and we go on with our lives, that sort of thing.
A big part of the reason that changed was because of the United States, and they have the United States is extremely capitalist, which is their strength, but also a weakness, because they have these parties and they have these people who lobby for, let's just commercialize everything. And one of those things was, medical stuff, medical science is good, but what if we can also commercialize this alternative medicine and our supplements and all that? And through all those kind of stuff, and legislating the ability for those people to market themselves, was tied into the growth of the alternative health industry. And that started during the 80s, maybe during the late 70s, during our lifetime, but it really bloomed and blossomed later on in the 90s and the 2000s. But that meant that these people who started out marketing supplements and marketing, this is alternative health, now marketed, this is an alternative to vaccines, and maybe you don't need, vaccines are bad, you just need this and this and this. And so that's where that came from, the whole alternative health and supplement kind of world. But yeah, that was because America's so capitalist. They gave these people a market.
I would even venture to say that it's not capitalist, it's chronic capitalist. It's not actual capitalist. And that goes back to my discourse about regimes and systems. But and the weird thing is that this is how cultures are different. We have the alternative stuff here that jives with the culture of, like, we have like a very extensive herbal old wives recipe sort of culture. So the old grandmas had and still have like a whole range of herbs that they brew as this for you to help you out with stuff. And that is just part of the Greek experience. However,
the Greek experience.
Like, grandma, like, oh, what happened to you? This, okay. I will brew you this and you will be right as rain. That's sort of thing. But that said, no grandma and no alternative medicine person would in the 90s and the early 2000s ever go for that alone. This was going to be and was always like a supplemental extra thing that you did alongside normal medicine. Does that make sense?
And it probably wasn't marketed officially, and they had official practitioners like practicing it, whereas it's more a home kind of thing. It's like a cultural thing rather than being a institutional thing. That's the difference of what we have now. It's But I mean, so it's not just about like that stuff. Like it's important to understand the world where these things exist. Like one of the things I'm really into and I talk about a lot is like say the 80s heavy metal, like so-called glam metal. I love it. People who dressed in tights and long frizzy teased hair and all that kind of stuff, that was mainstream pop music, because metal music was mainstream back then. It wasn't like a fringe, whatever, the way it is now. Metal was super mainstream, and that's what everyone had. But now people don't understand that culture, and they look back and they invented this thing called hair metal, which I just want to like explode anytime someone mentions hair metal, because all hard rock had long hair back then, not just metal. All metal had it, all hard rock had it. And that was that world. That wasn't like, that was just stage clothes. Basically, people had a stage persona, and that's what you had to do in order to market yourself. So everybody had that, and that was the world. So unless you understand that, you can't understand where metal came from. You can't understand what happened to music in the 80s unless you understand that commercial pressure that was on them for them to look a certain way in order to be like commercialized and popularized, and that's just what people expected. Like you couldn't show up to a concert dressed in jeans and shit looking, ripped t-shirt and all that kind of stuff, because that just wasn't what you did. Like that changed in the 90s with grunge. And that's what enabled people to make that change. It wasn't like, this is like, posy, people all dressed in airy-fairy, like, hair metal, blah, blah, blah. No, that's a complete invention of the 90s that didn't exist in the 80s. That was just what it was like. So, yeah, I think, and that just doesn't apply to, like, my specific interest in that stuff. It applies to everything. You have to understand the cultural context of where things came from and the wider world. You can't really take it out as in isolation and expect to understand it in the context of your current time, because then you will not ever understand that thing. Like just plucking something out and looking at it in your context of your current time, you do not get, like, even like you look at a 1950s musical and people are going like, la la la, oh, I feel so happy and gay and lovely. Oh, this is such a gay thing that I'm experiencing. Like, if you look at the context of you think, oh, wow, they're very progressive. Like, mentioning gayness, but it's like, Yeah, you have to understand that's a totally different meaning back then. So that is an extremely important thing always. Like, when we're mentioning like the Cold War, you have to understand that to understand James Bond. Without knowledge of the Cold War, you'll never... That's why James Bond, I think, turned into this thing with the Daniel Craig, like, super action man, bang, 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 whatever. Like a John Wick kind of thing, like all that.
Which is not what James Bond was.
No. And to think about James Bond and develop him in that way misunderstands the character. He doesn't come from that world. He doesn't exist. He wasn't created for that world. Like, what other kind of characters can you think of like that were created during that period?
MacGyver.
Yeah. Well, yeah, MacGyver's created in a very like split world. Exactly,
and in a world where America was de facto the good guys. The stuff like Desert Storm and all of that hadn't happened yet, so they were still riding on the coattails of saving the world in World War II, and Vietnam was like a small bracket of that we don't talk about. So MacGyver was like the quintessential good American, bringing light into the world of other people. And if you see the remakes of MacGyver now, he is basically he has this team of people like he does. He's an action guy. Like he did have some action, but it was more brainy stuff that he did. A lot more talking was done and a lot less fist fighting. That sort of thing. And he has this really jaded look to him that he did not have, and that's not MacGyver really. And it's a reflection of what I'm now and what is expected of Americans now, I suppose.
Yeah. But let's Star Trek. It's a massive Cold War thing. Like you're saying with MacGyver, Star Trek, oh my God, massive. Like early Star Trek was the Klingons were the Russians, weren't they, Baines? You've seen the first what do they call it? The original series. Tance, you've seen that. You grew up with that, didn't you? Like Captain Kirk. Baines, you grew up with the original series?
Yeah.
And the Klingons were Russians.
Vaguely, right. Yeah.
I would say for us, and that's weird, for us they were more like space Spartans. More than
Space Spartans.
Like, yeah.
But I mean,
also consider that the writers of Star Trek and the actors, and you see this in other 60s TV shows. The people writing these shows, acting in these shows, were World War II soldiers. Very often.
I would argue like
the actors had all served. I mean, Scotty, he'd been a Canadian fighter pilot, an infantryman, and all sorts of things.
And Gene Roddenberry himself also was, and Rod Serling of the Twilight Zone was. And you see all these, I know we're doing Star Trek, but on the Twilight Zone too, like most of the protagonists in a lot of those stories were, military service was a part of their background. And they couldn't get past that. So many characters.
I was just going to say, with Star Trek though, you really do have to understand that came from the Cold War period, because these people sort of have this American, it's like not just American, but like the United Federation of Planets, like the good guys, like, we are the allies going into this world of, and bringing peace and bringing freedom, which is that kind of like attitude from back then. And as Star Trek develops and it goes on, through the movies, and the Klingons were the bad guys, the evil empire that, that we're always like, there could be a massive war between us, or there might not be. And then in the movies, they had the big peace moment. And the peace moment with the Klingons, when they suddenly became like, they had their own perestroika, basically. Their empire collapsed. It was completely modeled on what was happening with the Soviet Union. It was like massively.
Well, for sure, that last movie, the sixth movie, was definitely.
Yeah, and then in the TV series, what's it called? The Next Generation. It continues that on. So the Klingons are not at war anymore, but they remember that kind of thing between the Federation, and they're like, oh, the Klingons, they're the good guys, this is a new world. How do we think about it? And that was how the Russians were in the society back then. They were seen as being, oh, are they good guys? Are they part of us or whatever? Like we can't look at them as the enemy anymore.
I would argue that the whole Cold War thing remained represented by the Romulans.
The Romulans, like in the Next Generation, so like I've been watching it again through, and the Romulans only like appear a couple of times. They're not really a big enemy. They're kind of like the weirdos. They're more like China, I would think. They're really more like China, yeah. In the
I don't
90s.
know. I mean, I remember how people were discussing them. That's why because I haven't seen all of that. I mean, I am seeing now, I'm rewatching certain episodes and stuff, but the thing that I remember very clearly was like they were discussing like the Romulans as being basically the communist bloc. Let's put it that way. More than anything else, and I mean over here in Greece and how it came across, and the Klingons were basically the space Spartans, and the Balkans. I don't remember, but there were some space Athenians thrown in somewhere. Everybody projects the culture that they are.
That they're familiar with.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Well, the Klingons became more about, honor and war and all that kind of stuff, but that kind of developed in the TV series, and they added those aspects to them in there, when they're not just the enemy anymore, they're actually friends of us and we have to understand them, so they develop that culture for them. Yeah, it's interesting, but when you understand it in the cultural context from which it came out of, it gives you a different perspective on it versus. So, okay, on the perspective of I was there, look, we've only got a few more minutes to go. I often think of, I actually thought of that while I was in, growing up in the 80s and the 90s. I was thinking, oh my God, not Cliff Richard, what's his name? Damn it, Little Richard. Little Richard is still alive. That was, I was thinking, I would look at him as an actor in movies and stuff when he'd pop up in a cameo. I was thinking, oh my God, I'm still alive in a period that Little Richard is still alive. And he was like one of the pioneers of rock and roll. And I'm still alive. And I feel so honored to be in the same world as this guy. And with Mickey Rooney, when you'd see him in movies, I would think, oh my God, Mickey Rooney, he's this, weird little funny old guy. But he was the biggest star in the world in the 1940s, and he'd been around, when Hollywood was sort of beginning, and I'm in the same world as him. And you watch Cannonball Run, that came out in the 80s. It was a funny, silly film. And there's Dean Martin and Frank Sinatra and all these amazing people in that who are massive stars back in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. And I would look at those and think, my God, I'm privileged to be able to see these big stars, and they're still recognizable stars. They're still making movies. That was amazing, but they're all gone now. So those people are all part of history. So yeah. Oh, our time is ending. Damn it. Thank you very much for listening to the Quackcast number 745. Thank you, Baines and Tarns.
And thank you, listeners.
Thank you.
Yay.
We're all a part of history, and this moment in history will be part of history very soon. So you'll be glad you lived through it. And yeah, we'll move on and keep on going as the time continues. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.